Forbes Books presents The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani, highlighting the pioneers that reimagined possibilities and reimagined businesses. All right, joining us on the pod this week is Tim Bottke, a senior strategy partner at Deloitte and the author of the new book, Digital Transformation Payday, Navigate the Hype, Lower the Risks, Increase Return on Investments. Tim is also an associate professor for strategy and digital transformation at one of the world's best business schools, SDA Bocconi. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Joe.
So Gerry and Tim, I know you guys, I think you guys are long lost brothers. You're all about digital transformation. So Gerry, when I told you about Tim, what were your initial impressions about this gentleman?
No, I really like the idea is really looking into how do we gather the return on investment on everything that we are doing related to digital transformation. Most people do not really look into the numbers. So it's I think it's an important topic, and I was very intrigued to see what's Tim's angle. So very interesting to hear him on the podcast.
Wonderful. And Tim, it took you 4 years to research and write the book. And we asked this question of guests many a time. So, and you know what's coming, Tim. Please provide us the ultimate definition of digital transformation.
That's my favorite question because there's no such thing as an ultimate definition. And when you spend 4 years with a topic, you find out that there are more definitions than books and articles. And even in the same article, there are sometimes two. So for me, actually, it's for the simple question, it should be a simple answer. Number one is it's all about the transformation part. And most people get lost in spending too much time focusing on the digital part. For me, I'm a consultant. So for me, digital is just a tool and a tool to transform companies. And transformation is only just a tool to fulfill a strategy with which you can win in the marketplace. Because you see so many companies who just embark on the journey. They say, we are now agile. They have no clear goal. They have no strategy behind. Then they apply different technologies, not leveraging the synergies and the beauty of making something unique. They just take off the shelf. And then they believe that 4 years later and hundreds of millions less in their pockets, their competitors will be shocked by the great result. And that almost never happens.
It's funny, Gerry's smiling as you're saying all that, because like I joked, you guys are long lost brothers, right? Right, Gerry? We've been trying to, you've been a big proponent of, digitization versus digital transformation. And he essentially took the words right out of your mouth and your book.
Yeah, no, I mean, really, you have to have some transformation in the process, because like back in the days, 20 years ago, it was acceptable to say that you are doing digital transformation just by translating some of your business processes on some digital support. But nowadays, if it doesn't come with the change in the process, in the rethinking of the business in some kind of a process, then it's not really a transformation. It's simply moving an existing process from whatever traditional support onto a digital support, and that's not really a transformation. You have to reimagine your business. You have to transform your business. You have to use technology in novel ways in order to transform your business. And by the way, I love your remark about agile. Many people use agile as a stand-in for chaos, lack of organization, lack of measurable objectives. It's like, it's a very abused word, agile.
Yeah, and I've seen clients and many people just putting agile on every PowerPoint slide, explaining what they want to do. And then you add a bit of AI and robotics, process automation. And I think we can come up with 20 buzzwords here in this group. I'm not saying that these elements don't make sense. I'm just saying they are often used with the wrong intention or just for what I call digital washing.
Yeah. And Tim, this sort of dovetails into what I want to ask next, because in the book, your research goes beyond the hype and you uncover the real financial impact of digital transformation. Is this the hype you're talking about, like all these buzzwords and such?
Yes. And it's no surprise. Look, like what I'm saying in the book is that there's a huge ecosystem around digital transformation, and many participants in the ecosystem benefit more from digital transformation than the companies which actually should transform. And that drives this hype, that all the vendors need to sell their licenses. The consultants like me need to implement the stuff. So the politicians need to put digital on everything so that it sounds more modern. So this whole ecosystem has driven this trend to the hype maximum you can imagine. And it really makes my skin crawl, as we say in Germany. When you hear, look, it cannot be measured. It's digital. We cannot use the traditional KPIs. And then I'm usually saying, but look, it's business, isn't it? We don't do this for a purpose, which is making things digital. We do that for a business reason, hopefully. And business reasons can be measured, not always easily, but they can. And that's how this whole journey of the research started.
Yeah, I mean, even if you measure just 80% of it, you still can measure something. Maybe
Yes.
you don't measure the entire thing. Maybe you don't have like 100% to the comma, everything, but you can have a kind of an idea of 80%. Are we there yet or not? If you don't have a metric, I would strongly recommend all of our customers not to do it, because that means that you're not ready to embark on a process because you're not measuring anything. So how would you know if you've been successful or not?
And Tim, in your consultancy, I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with businesses that are all about that KPI. And this is sort of like not only just the digital transformation, it's almost like the transformation of the mindset for a lot of these companies, correct?
I would start a step earlier. I think in the end, it's all about the strategy. And there's also a lot of talk about we need to change mindset. We need to reskill. It's all true. But it's only true if that is part of the strategy, which I'm repeating myself here, which makes you win against someone else in the market. You can reskill the whole organization if they are then reskilled and have no edge other than new skills. Or if everyone else in the market is also reskilled, what's the purpose? So that's why I always say, look, start with a strategy and then take all the elements or put all the elements into place, which can be technology, which can be skills, which can be learning how to really do agile, not on PowerPoint, but in real life. And that could lead you to an end result where you can actually show your competitors that you've done something better.
And you've said that the one single pitfall everyone needs to be aware of is that digital transformation is an end-to-end journey. What do you mean by that?
Many companies are picking elements. They say, look, we are now agile. We do agile transformation, or let's get agile coaches in, or they pick technology, or one technology usually, or a pilot of a technology, or what I say in the book, they start transforming at the frontier of their business. So in areas where it's easy, founding a new company somewhere at your edge, buying something, and they never think about reintegrating all that into their core. You need to have the end-to-end picture based on a strategy, and then you can start transforming. And it will still be a journey where you cannot plan. Many things will happen which you didn't expect, but at least these elements need to be into place. And you need to measure it. And that's what I'm also saying, based on what we just discussed. If you cannot measure it, it's probably not worth even starting. So we have full agreement here.
So I would make a comment, given this board strategy. I think what is important though is when you are strategically rethinking your business, you're rethinking your positioning, and I think it's very important to take into account all of the new opportunities that the technology brings to the table. Like you have to reassess like where the industry is. For example, like Tesla manufactures the cars with all the features in, and then they would just switch on and off based on what do you want to pay for it. It's a new way of thinking about, and this is only possible because today this is enabled by the technology. This wasn't enabled 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but this is it's a major shift in the way you manufacture a car. And the more traditional manufacturers, they would build in all the options. Like that creates a lot of complexity in the manufacturing process. And understanding this technological aspect, you can build that into your strategy and making a huge difference. So I think like people like Elon Musk, why are they so powerful in their business execution, is because they understand all the possibilities that the technology brings to the table. And when he is thinking of the business strategy, he incorporates these possibilities into the business strategy. He's marrying this. It's like one thing for him. this is why he is such a genius in the way he's putting things together. I don't want to talk about his controversial parts, but there are some areas where he's really, like the way he's thinking is he's having a holistic view about strategy with the technology possibilities already built in. So he's not thinking about business and technology kind of like two things, but is kind of blending them into one thing.
Just to follow up on that point, I think that's an important discussion I very often have with executives. And I'm very sure it will change now in the next years. But in many boards, you still have the view that technology should be done by the CTO, and that you don't need to understand, as you said, all the details, what these platforms can do, what new technologies can do. And then, like in the best case, they then install a CDO, like as an even more modern version of outtasking the understanding of technology to someone else. And that leads to what we just discussed, that it's not really part of the core strategy development. It's kind of an attachment. It's more part of the execution. And that leaves all these great opportunities off the table. And I'm very sure boards, advisory boards, they will have to change and have a much deeper understanding of technology, because for an entrepreneur coming out of the tech space, it's easily said. But for a typical chief commercial officer or so, he needs to learn, or she needs to learn all these things, not just as there's this platform and there's this platform, but what can this platform do for my business in the future?
And you've said it, this, like you mentioned, this should be a CEO topic. But what about, Gerry mentioned Elon, who's sort of has the business and visionary side. But what if you run into a company where the CEO is more of like that visionary, 30,000 foot view? I don't really want to know what's going on the ground. Here's my grand picture of this company. How do you marry those two thought processes together?
Good question. I think, you first.
Well, I've seen many in my life, and I've seen people that almost 80 years old and with a very high degree of curiosity, looking into what's possible, talking to everybody, like challenging everybody, and they were just into it, and they had that kind of curious mindset to look into things and poke around and everything. And they would eventually get there and would really drive transformative changes for their companies with technology at core and everything. And I've seen CEOs that are my age that they would say, no, I need to bring the CIO in or the CTO. Yes, you need to bring them in, but you have to kind of be curious and understand what's all about and have a conversation, and they can advise you and they can support you and everything, but you need to own it. This is not something, as you mentioned, Tim, this is not something that you created a job and you just delegate it and you have no understanding about it.
And like in the worst case, you just miss all these opportunities because you just don't know the tool set which is available to you. And yes, probably you don't need to understand how every single tool works to the very last nitty-gritty detail, but at least you need to understand, is it a tool I can use for, I don't know, scenario A or scenario B or not? And that's the key challenge. And I think it will go away a bit over time. But maybe for some companies, this process is too slow if you just take it the evolutionary route.
Can we dig down a little bit into the differences in how industry should be approaching digital transformation, like with separate verticals? Are there any industries that are more in the forefront of digital transformation that are really taking the reins on doing this in the future?
I think the industry question is always something where I'm usually struggling, in the sense that why is this question relevant? I think if we come back to the strategy part, what is done very often in the ecosystem is saying, look, this industry is more advanced than you are. So you are so terrible, so you have to speed up and see what these guys can do, and you can do much less, so you need to change. And I've had a very interesting discussion with a senior executive of an insurance company in a well-protected market. And he more or less said, look, Tim, I know what this is all about, but I also know where we make a lot of money in this market. We make the money based on the intransparency, which we have in everything. And I know that there might be a disruptor one day creating the transparency, and then we are in terrible times. So what we've done is we've launched a InsurTech, but in a different market where we don't hurt our core business. And as soon as we see the storm coming, we roll back the skills and the capabilities from that market. In the meantime, we make the profit we deserve from the transparency. And that got me thinking really, like, you cannot blame an industry for being late in the game. You can only blame them if they are not as digital as they should be to really win in their marketplace. And there might be good reasons for industries to be a bit late. But you cannot benchmark industries against each other from my perspective. Not always.
Yeah, well, I think in some areas you can look into them. Like, for example, like watch manufacturers comparing to cell phones and smartphones. Many people smartwatches and all of this thing. Many people no longer use a traditional watch. Now, where are you in that conversation? How would you approach like a swatch, and how would you advise a swatch in this process? Because there is a lot of opportunity that, because they were not at the table at the beginning, there is much that they could have done.
Yeah, they've created new markets, but if you look into, Switzerland is very close. If you look into what the Swiss manufacturers are doing, it's also a strategy. And I think the value, if you want to buy some of these watches today, you wouldn't get them for some time. It's probably the best investment you can make, buying, 10 of these things and just letting them sit there for a few years. And probably not a good investment buying into some of these digital watches, which are just commodity. So it's different markets. That's my perspective, at least.
If you look at something like Apple and their enterprise value, and you look at Swatch and their enterprise value, and Swatch, it's a pretty traditional company. They've been around for a while, and Apple not. But they managed in a very short amount of time to get really far. So this is the part that I'm challenging. I think there are opportunities that are popping up that technology enables, that if you are aware of it, and if you are looking into, well, how would this, like, I always like to advise people to think like this: how would this impact my industry, and what other opportunities would this give me? Maybe I can use it in a different way, like video calls enables collaboration in a way that, oh my God, it hasn't been possible not even 10 years ago. And the 3G, which is still in infancy, together with the video technologies and remote work, like just think of telemedicine. These are some really absurd jumps forward in terms of technology, and some industries will be heavily disrupted by this. And if you haven't asked yourself, okay, how is this going to impact my industry, and what are the options that these technologies are opening up for me, then I think that those CEOs have not done a good job. That's my opinion on that.
But that's very true. I think that's also not what I meant. I think you need to have your eyes open all the time. That's what the definition of strategy is, to find something where you can really differentiate. And if it's technology, and it's more and more technology these days, then it's a key element of the whole thing. But then we come back to the end-to-end thing. That's only one element. And there are good reasons why some companies can really make markets and others cannot. And it's not just because they invented in technology. There's always much more behind. And all I was saying around this industry angle is, like, you cannot say this industry is behind. On average, you have to look deeper into things.
I think that the chief executive officer should be renamed to chief curiosity officer or chief dreamer officer, something like that, because I don't think that the job of the chief executive officer is to be in the nitty-gritty of the implementation. However, a chief executive officer should understand where things are, should understand the opportunities, should be curious about what else, what's next, what's new in the market, and how will that affect your industry. it's not just about reporting on your quarterly earnings, and like this is where I believe the role of a CEO is to be, the chief dreaming officer or chief curiosity officer that is pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits, exploring what if scenarios, and like I'm talking in my book about this thing, like you need to have pilots, small projects where you experiment with different ideas. The CEO has to be there. The CEO has to understand those pilots. The CEO has to be, okay, we are trying something new that could be potentially transformative. I need to understand what's that, in my opinion.
Yes, I fully agree, and I think he or she, they have another role, and that's what all these financial analysis really prove, is they need to make sure that these pilots, if they succeed, that they are scalable. Yeah. Because there are endless pilots of technologies which all have, by design usually, because everyone in the ecosystem is working on it, a positive business case. That I've done this process optimization RPA based pilot in this area, and lucky me, I only invested X dollars and payback was 18 months. I've seen hundreds of these. But then I usually ask, so great, congratulations. So you save the equivalent of 10 FTEs, which you can reuse now for more qualitative, greater work. But remind me again, didn't you have 85,000 FTE? So what can we now do to make this little pilot something relevant for the CFO in the P&L at scale at some point in time? Because otherwise it's only, what I said before, an experiment at the frontier of your business. It's not changing your business if you don't take it back and scale it.
This is what comes back to what you initially said, like the lack of a proper target, like a lack of like if you don't measure it, that also means that you don't have a proper target. Like it's where are we going with this? Okay, we're gonna do this, but if it's successful, what will this do to us? What is going to be the KPI that is going to be transformed or changed or whatever?
Yeah, and then that makes you then end up, okay, then you have, I don't know, 5 of these robots in your processes, and you need 1,000. And then usually the pilot is selected based on a bias, and the bias is, let's pick something which can be piloted, so it's not big, not too big. It's easy, and you need to really think from day one, okay, that's maybe the first step, but what's then the second to scale it more and more? Because otherwise, you have a good business case, but only for the pilot, and a pilot is not meant to be a successful pilot, but the initial step for something bigger. Because otherwise, then we come back to the value equation of my book. Like in the end, it's all about increasing the value of the company at some point. And if it's only 0.00004% of your cost base addressed, then why would any shareholder with an understanding of what is really behind value this little tiny piece if they don't see the scale up following next?
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it has to generate an extra enterprise value. It has to create value somewhere, either for shareholders or some other way. But it's for sure, it needs to result in some kind of a value.
All right, Tim, let's give your book a little love here. In it, Digital Transformation Payday, you provide a framework for defining your next digital transformation effort end-to-end and configuring your initiatives for maximum return on investment. What can folks expect when they pick up the book, Tim?
So first, they can expect based on more than 20 years of working and advising clients, and based on very deep research, they can expect a view which is neutral, like getting the hype out of all these discussions. They can expect details on what accelerates your paydays and what makes them come much later than you expected. That's kind of the payday idea. So can you speed up the payday, or what slows them down? You can expect a framework. I'm a consultant, so I love frameworks, but not because I love frameworks in that sense, but because I want to show that it has to be end to end. I don't care what anyone calls the elements in the end, but it has to be an end to end journey. And then you can expect the empirical part of the research, which is looking into 20,000 reports of companies using natural language processing, machine learning to see, is there anything about how digital these companies are? And is there any link to how valuable they are from a shareholder perspective in terms of market cap? It's a journey from the qualitative to the real hard data.
And I don't mean to insult CEOs, but can a CEO read this book and understand everything in it? No offense to those CEOs who are talking about that don't have the grasp of the digital transformation, but is this easily consumable for those CEOs?
I would say yes.
Thanks. I would say if they want, yes.
Yes, that's a good point. You really need to, and it gets me back to the curiosity part. As a CEO, you should have to have this kind of curiosity. What is the framework? How do I set things up in a way that makes sense? Even in the way we experiment, like having a framework when you do an experiment, I think it's important. You don't experiment willy-nilly. Hey, I have an idea. Let's do something.
And one of the key learnings, look, after having been a consultant for such a long time, when I went back to academia to really fix this issue, the first thing I really had to relearn was looking at the details. And not at every detail, but deciding when I need to go really deep. Because when you're a consultant, if it's not, 14, 20 point font PowerPoint, then you stop reading. That's not what this book is all about. If you want simple PowerPoint, then that's not it. It's going much deeper, and you can always skip parts if they are too technical or etc. But I wouldn't say that any board member wouldn't be able to read the book if they want.
Excellent. Gerry, is that the tack you took as well writing your book? It's for the tech geek in all of us, but also your run-of-the-mill CEO can also consume it.
Well, I on purpose, I try to stay high level and really to make CEOs and executives look at technology in different ways, and especially think of technology as a toolbox that can enable your business to do things in different ways. So I try to not go into details as much as I can. Why? Because I think in some cases, we are too quick to go into the details without addressing some high level topics like, okay, why am I doing this? How will this impact my business? How it will create enterprise value? How is this going to transform my industry? And what are the other technologies out there that can have a disruptive potential? And addressing those kind of, and allowing you to dream about, okay, let me think about my industry in different ways. Let me bring it together. Let me put like a wrapper around it to kind of say, okay, well, I need to measure this. I need to go in this direction, but keep it high level. You don't need to go into all the details to have a kind of a setup, a framework, a way of thinking. And that's really what I was trying to do in my book. So this is on purpose. I didn't go in too much details with my book, and I just want to keep people dreaming and inspiring them to be curious about their industry, but also have a way of approaching this.
Tim, you agree with that? Good approach.
Yes, yeah, I do. So obviously, I think you lose people if you go too deep. So I also haven't done that. I think the tricky part is that when you go towards the financials, you need to have at least some basic understanding of some mechanisms. And compared to the original research, a lot of stuff just was scrapped or went into the appendix because it's just too much. But the high level outcomes, I think they're much stronger when they're based on real research versus just guessing.
And this is an open question for both of you, but did you guys feel like your books or your respective books were sort of like racehorses where you had to rein in it a little bit because you're like, oh my God, I'm getting way down this rabbit hole of getting too technical. I got to pull on the reins a little bit. Did either of you guys run into that while you were putting it together?
I certainly did. But the good thing is that at some point there are deadlines. And that's always helping. And then, so in my curious mind, and I have one, I could go on forever, and I know this. So, and I've known this for so many years that I know I have to stop myself and even ask other people to tell me to stop.
It sounds like you, Gerry.
For sure. Look, listen, less is more in certain ways. Like
Yeah.
it's, but compressing things and simplifying things is not trivial. Like how do you simplify it? Because if you simplify it too much, it loses meaningless. It loses real meaningful things, and if you're complicating it too much, then it makes it really complicated to read and understand. So you have to strike the right balance, and as Tim said, having some kind of a process that kind of reins you in, it does help.
And I'm always telling my teams and my students, look, it's much harder to write a good one pager than to write a average 100-pager. And that's always true.
And speaking of your students, I want to wrap this up by talking about the future. So, like I mentioned, you're a professor at SDA Bocconi. What's the future of digital transformation look like in this next generation? The students that you're seeing every day, are they accepting? Are they more amenable? Are they prepared for a career that's going to involve a lot of digital transformation?
I think, funny enough, they often have the opposite problem from the management we discussed. So they're much deeper in all these technologies, but they need to learn much more about the basic economics and the strategic components which will make a business succeed. Because they have just been, and it's ending now, I wouldn't say thanks to, but due to the geopolitical crisis, recession, etc. So the times where just a great idea and a technology savviness made a business, I think that they're gone for some time. And I think everyone needs to understand in this younger generation that it also requires an idea which is unbeatable and not easy to copy, an end-to-end view into things, a way to business, meaning at some point in time to making money, to make your investors happy, to pay your teams, like all these things, which is boring old style management. I think that will become much more relevant now in the times. And you see that now with many startups in Germany and all over, like laying off 50, 60% of their people. That's also part of the business. If you just plan based on something which is not making the thing profitable at some point in time.
Are you seeing that too, Gerry? Because you're obviously seeing it on the ground with these young entrepreneurs coming up and working with OSF. Do you see a lot of what Tim's talking about?
Yeah, I think it's definitely we have some kind of a feeling of reality hitting you when you actually have to start making money, and it's not just about an idea. You have to actually make end meets, and it's I would say the younger generation needs to understand the business concepts much better. I think that's why are you creating enterprise value, because when you have a company, it's not just about keeping your employees happy, it's not just about keeping your customers happy. It's really you have to keep the company happy. That means you have to make money, you have to generate profit, and also that means also keeping your investors happy, and in some situations keeping your partners happy. So you have multiple pillars that you have to balance out. So it's not just one thing that you have to address. Managing, it's a well nuanced proposition where you have to keep in balance all of these pillars in order for your business to be solid. Otherwise you have a problem.
And actually, Joe, I think there was already one assumption in your question, where I'm not sure whether it's true that the two of us are not part of the younger generation.
Oh. My apologies to you both. I want to finish up by talking about the future of digital transformation, Tim. It's the old line from Ferris Bueller, life moves fast. It's nearly impossible to foresee the upcoming technology fast enough to understand what really is making the difference. So for leaders listening, for folks involved in digital transformation, how do we stay relevant and in the know? Like, what are the best ways that you suggest? Is it building a strong network of people? Is it reading? Is it what would you suggest to that, folks, when it comes to, man, how do I keep up with this crazy train?
Lucky us, it's not a lack of sources. It's just a time shortage, which is preventing people from staying in the know. You can read. There's so much to read. The more you read, the quicker you see what is repetitive and what is really new. and I've read hundreds of articles for the research. And after the first 100, it was repetitive again and again and again, all self-referencing. You can listen to podcasts like this one. So there are many, many ways. And I think what I really like is this term curiosity. I think if you have this, then you shouldn't be afraid.
Well, you're a smart young man, Tim Bottke. Thank you. You too, Gerry. You're a smart young man.
That's what I wanted to hear.
So, Tim, if folks wanted to find out more about you and the book, where's the easiest and best way to find you?
It's easy. It's DigitalTransformationPayday.com. We have a website. There you find all the information you need. And the book is available in all channels. And I'm reachable over LinkedIn if there are any questions anytime. Happy to answer. And I love discussing this. And I think my only limit is the time limit. Otherwise, I would never stop. So I've asked people to stop me when I discuss too much.
Well, that's what I'm here for, Tim. So, Gerry, any last words for Tim before we let him go?
No, really great book, great ideas. I think it's good to have a framework to measure everything and to make sense of everything, because there is a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of information. You really need to make sure and have a way to see what is what and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And one way of doing that is to have a proper way of quantifying, measuring, and calculating an ROI. So I think that's pretty good. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks for the invitation.
He's Tim Bottke. Go to DigitalTransformationPayday.com for more information. Tim, have a great one.
Thank you very much.
This has been The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani. To participate in the conversation, go to GerardZatvani.com. The Great Digital Transformation is a production of Forbes Books.